I'm seeing teams merging together. I'm seeing, like, when you kind of think about the evolution of the team, and we had that awesome podcast the three of us did on Death of the Real Estate Broker, Death of the Real Estate Team. What does that actually mean? What we've seen over the last 7 years is we've seen the team entity change and actually start gobbling up brokerages. What I mean by that is my brokerage, my little brokerage, became a team. Big, I don't know if necessarily Chuck Fauzi and them did it with Revelation, but we see a lot of these brokerages that come in and they merge over here to EXP and they become a team. So the team is gobbling up the brokerage model, which I think is fascinating. But have you guys seen or heard of teams combining forces? I know we tried to do it a couple years into this, Jay, with our boy Matt Chase and the Chase brothers. That was a fun roller coaster ride.
Right.
And it didn't work out for certain reasons, but there were things that actually were beneficial to both of our teams. We just couldn't make the culture thing work. But I really think that's what we're going to see, a lot more of consolidation. We're seeing teams combine. Are you guys seeing that? And what are your thoughts on the idea of teams combining into a mega team type of situation?
Yeah, I've been hearing bigger teams gobbling up smaller teams. That's been, I think the strategy around, Zillow and how they're setting up, these Zillow Flex accounts is enabling, some of the better operators to kind of, put teams together and go, expand into markets and things of that nature. But outside of that, I haven't really heard that many teams going together. I mean, it's hard. I mean, as you know, Al, I would say that sounds like a very challenging path to take. And, you have to have the two, leaders with the right egos in place to do something like that. And you got to know how to co-brand or determine how you're going to effectively build your brand, which would be a very challenging thing for most people, I would think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I got two. Yeah. It's a good, I mean, in theory, it makes sense, right? Hey, we can share resources, we can come together. Our experience of this was, are we going to buy Coldwell Banker Crossroads, or are we not going to buy Coldwell Banker Crossroads? And, consolidating and running as one for, in 12, 18 month stretch. And it was night and day fighting each other, because you have one culture versus another culture, and different leadership styles and different leadership principles, different values. So it made it really, really challenging, really, really hard to make that come together, to make it work, to make it make sense. Where I think you could is kind of a bleed out. If you're kind of the ink blot, theory, if you're kind of expanding, like what we were able to do, just in a simple example, bleeding marketing over into Duncan, Oklahoma, finding a true rock star. She's still there to this day, which, like, God bless her, but just bleeding out, it makes sense. I think, the one thing that we found, and this kind of goes back to my second point, Patrick Lencioni wrote a great book called The Motive, and it was one of the books that he released later on. I think he threw it out there in 20, and we know how, instrumental the advantage was for us in our career and our thinking as business owners and moving into the future. The Motive should have came out even before the advantage. And the fable inside of The Motive is two companies coming together, two CEOs coming together. And one had to let go of the ego. And that's the whole outcome over ego concept. Get what is right. Let's get to right. And let me get where my heart is. Only one can be CEO, right? There's only one name in the box. You can't have two head of company. So one, when you do bring that merger together, somebody's got to relinquish, I'm not head of company. And it's for anybody that's coming together with it, I don't do it unless you read The Motive, because what it talks about is one of them ends up taking head of marketing and one of them takes head of company, and they came together. So I think it's just understanding that. In theory, it makes sense, but it takes great leaders and let me step aside, not let my ego get in the way. What is the goal? What are we trying to accomplish? outcome over ego, and let me get in my lane and you get in your lane, and then let's go. And you look at why statistically that's probably the best move to do, because what's the probability of you going into a new market and starting from scratch that you're going to succeed? What is this failure success rate of new entities, new companies? That's why, the whole mergers and acquisitions, why just go gobble them up, go buy them instead of trying to start it from scratch, is just a higher probability of success.
Yeah, that makes sense. So essentially, John and Al, you guys think that this is more of a new version of expansion into new marketplaces? That would make sense to me, because like everything about this sounds like, that's gonna be go over like a turd in a punch bowl. Like,
well, you'd mentioned Zillow, and I don't want to make the conversation solely about Zillow, but I think that certain people, and I'll name the first one that comes to mind is Kyle Whissel, because we had an extensive conversation about what he's done in San Diego with his Zillow Flex account. You can't get Zillow Flex unless you're on Kyle's team. He literally owns the whole county. Like, you can't buy a zip. It's all his. He's monopolized it. And from a strategic standpoint, I mean, that's huge. Like that, and do you have to play the game? Yes. It's the same thing. I started, the correlation that I started making with Kyle's situation, it reminded me kind of an REO. How some people went REO when REO started getting popular, and you saw the REO guys went from driving, a little Ford Focus to a Mercedes. And of course, then that went away. But you guys remember that back in 07, 08, 09, 2000, by 2010, those REO guys were driving really nice cars. But it was a system. They were playing a different game. They had very, very little upside. Like, their revenue per deal was very low, but it's a volume play. You have to have your systems together. And the same thing with Zillow.